Evercore ISI out with a new study on which sectors could benefit from each candidate's policies. Joining us right now is Sarah Bianchi. She is Evercore ISI chief strategist of international political affairs and public policy. Did you work into your thinking about these industries the idea that there would be no federal taxes?
Well, no, we don't have. We didn't take the whole income tax out of the in the model, but we did assume that there will be a real serious tariff war under Trump 2.0 if he is elected next week. We think that he would be very aggressive with China and also other places where the United States has a trade deficit. Mexico. Europe would be top of mind. So definitely expecting volatility in and around some of the trade disruption that we expect.
How are you modeling out the tariff piece of this, though?
Well, we don't assume that what President Trump says he would do, 60% across the board on all Chinese imports or 10% on all U.S. imports. If he does that, that will be unbelievably disruptive. I think our auto analyst says that GM's earnings would go down like 30% or something of that sort. However, we do think that President Trump is very serious, and Lighthizer and others who executed this effort in the first Trump administration will be back on the job. We think they have a lot of executive authority. And so we tried to take it down to some portion thereof. In the first Trump term, we went from 3% on China tariffs to 10%. We've taken it to about 20% by the time he would be done this round, and similar for the rest of the world. So it's quite disruptive, but not what he's proposing on the campaign trail.
OK, so let's then talk about the winners and losers. Who do you see as the realistic winners of this? Who are the losers? And to the extent you were going to position yourself this morning ahead of what, if you were to take the position that former President Trump were to win, how does that play out, and then play it out for the economy and for the winners and losers in a Harris win?
Yeah. So what we did in our study was we looked at three, dramatic campaign days from this already very dramatic campaign. The day of the Trump attempted assassination, the Biden-Trump debate, and then the Harris-Trump debate being more of a positive for the Democrats. And we saw the biggest moves in and around financials. I think that's because of the potential deregulatory environment that President Trump would put in place. Biden has had a very, very active consumer protection bureau. And then we think there'll be a more friendly M&A environment under Trump. So financials, a clear winner. For Harris, the clearest winner was clean energy across the board. A little bit bifurcated in healthcare. Some healthcare stocks that benefit from the Affordable Care Act do better under Harris, and some Medicare Advantage do better under Trump. But now we're starting to see in the markets a bit of weakness in and around the peso, around European stocks. I think that is really the market trying to express what this trade war might mean.
What do you think of defense stocks in a Trump administration? The reason I ask is the natural reaction to that question historically over the past couple of weeks has been, oh, if you were Raytheon, that'll be great. If you were Lockheed Martin, that would be great. But then I start to think to myself, if Elon Musk is actually in there trying to fix this thing, and Joe Lonsdale is in there, that the Raytheons of the world would get wrecked because they would try, I would imagine, to try to revolutionize, hopefully in a good way, by the way, the Defense Department by becoming a lot more innovative, and they would stop a lot of the sort of pork in the system, which I imagine some of the more legacy traditional defense contractors currently benefit from.
That's certainly true. Look, if they are able to execute that kind of disruption that Musk is talking about, certainly that would be harmful to some of the legacy industries that have benefited from defense contracts for years. I'm not totally sure that I believe that a lot of people have tried those ideas over the years, everybody from John McCain, get rid of pork, and it's still alive and well. So I'm not totally confident that Elon Musk will get the job done there. But either way, I do think you're right. Traditionally, we think of Republicans, friendly defense, but you also have to think about some of these Ukraine supplementals and other things that we've seen that have helped defense companies and stocks. But we do know that Trump is less supportive of theirs. So all in all, I'm not sure defense is a clear winner, even if Elon Musk can't get the job done.
Sarah, do you take a position as to which candidate would be better overall for the economy, for the stock market, for anything like that?
I mean, I think traditionally, people remember Trump is good for the stock market. I think they're remembering a different economic plan, though, an economic plan that was really fueled by a corporate rate cut. And the stuff around tariffs and around immigration came later and more dribbled out. Here, I think we see the flip. We see, I do think that he will extend the current tax rates. However, that's not going to necessarily provide a new fiscal impulse. At the same time, I think the tariffs and the immigration stuff, again, while not exactly what he's proposing, will be dramatic. And our estimates have that would be impactful on both growth and inflation. So while the stock market may initially be excited for a Trump 2.0, I think it will be more of a bumpy ride than last time.